The rain came down like needles, piercing the canopy in silver streaks. Mud sucked at their boots as they trudged deeper, following a narrow path that seemed carved by something ancient or alive. Every few meters, bones jutted from the earth, slick with rain, arranged as if laid deliberately. They told no story of time. Some were brittle and moss-stained. Others still gleamed with pale marrow. The air thickened, every breath clinging to the throat. The group said nothing, afraid of breaking whatever held this forest in its grip. A flash of lightning tore the horizon, and something moved. Not an animal, not wind, but something dragging itself just beyond the line of sight. The trail of bones didn't end. It continued uphill, twisting into fog. But the mud revealed something more. Fresh tracks, human-sized, and still filling with rain. The rain softened to a steady whisper, but the forest didn't relax. It listened. Every drip and rustle seemed deliberate, like the jungle itself was breathing with them. They followed the bone path uphill, each step heavier, the air thicker with decay. The scent of wet moss turned to something metallic, sharp. They found more bones, still pink at the edges. Something had been feeding, and not long ago. The drone camera above them flickered, static crawling across the screen before it went dark. A distant sound answered the silence. 3 dull knocks, echoing through the trees. They reached a narrow ravine where the earth seemed freshly split open. Roots dangled like veins over the edge, dripping mud into a dark pit below. The trail of bones led straight down into it, swallowed by the abyss. No one spoke. The air was too heavy for words. The rain thinned to a mist, and for a moment it was silent enough to hear their own heartbeats. Then from the pit came a faint sound, a dragging breath, wet and uneven. Someone, or something, was alive down there. The flashlight beams trembled as they pointed downward, cutting through the mist to reveal a face, half buried in the muck. Eyes open, fresh blood mixing with rain. The pit wasn't just filled with bones. It was filled with the newly dead. A rush of wind swept through the forest, scattering leaves like shrapnel. The team stepped back as the ground trembled slightly underfoot. Something had moved below. Miguel tossed a flare into the ravine. It spiraled through the mist before hitting the bottom, igniting a red glow that painted everything in blood tones. The pit wasn't empty. Dozens of skeletal remains, freshly stripped, lay coiled around a mound of torn foliage. But at the center of that mound was something worse. A massive skull, half human, half beast, its jaw fused with bone shards. The rain hissed against the flare. For a heartbeat, the jungle went utterly still. Then, somewhere behind them, twigs snapped in rhythm, like footsteps approaching. The flare flickered out, leaving only the dim pulse of flashlights. Panic whispered between them, though no one spoke it aloud. The tracks around the pit went random. They circled, layered over each other. Something had been watching this place for days, maybe weeks. And now, it was close. A single droplet of rain landed on Lena's cheek, followed by another, warmer. She looked up. Through the canopy, something massive shifted, dislodging branches and dripping thick, dark fluid that wasn't water. The forest seemed to close in, every sound sharpened, every breath too loud. The last thing they heard before running was the sound of bones cracking somewhere in the mist, fresh, deliberate, and near. They ran till their lungs burned, the forest swallowing every footstep like it didn't want to let them go. When they finally stopped, night had already bled through the canopy. Their flashlights flickered, beams trembling over trunks scarred with strange symbols. Circles, slashes, and handprints too large to be human. The rain had stopped, but the air steamed, with heat and silence. They decided to camp, though no one dared to sit with their back to the trees. Lena stared at her mud-covered notebook, realizing something that made her chest tighten. The bone trail wasn't leading to something. It was leading away. The jungle came alive in the dark. Low hums echoed from nowhere, and glowing insects drifted like embers through the fog. Miguel whispered that the carvings weren't warnings. They were marks of territory. They were trespassing. The forest floor began to tremble slightly, the vibration too steady to be thunder. A rhythmic pulse moved through the ground, heavy and deliberate. Camila's hand tightened on her machete as she turned toward the noise, but it stopped, cut off mid-beat. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Then, a faint hiss. A breath from above. A branch cracked overhead, then another. Arun pointed the flashlight upward just in time to catch a blur of movement. Whatever it was fast, climbing through branches like liquid shadow. They bolted again, the beam bouncing wildly across trunks, roots, and flashes of bone-white shapes. They burst into a clearing filled with ancient stone pillars, each carved with human figures kneeling before towering beasts. The air buzzed faintly, like static before a storm, and then, at the edge of the clearing, something gleamed. Metal. A camera tripod. Someone had been here recently. They inspected the tripod, mud still clinging to its legs. It hadn't been there long. Arun found a memory card lodged in the camera body. When he wiped it clean and connected it to his tablet, static burst across the screen. Then a few seconds of footage. Rain, bones, and the same ravine that I had just escaped. A voice whispered, "It follows sound." The feed cut abruptly to a blurred shape moving on all fours, impossibly fast. Miguel grabbed the tablet and threw it into the mud. The jungle went quiet again. Too quiet. Then from the trees came soft, clicking sounds like teeth tapping against wood. A sudden gust extinguished their lights. In the darkness, the sound returned. The clicking, closer now, circling them. Miguel whispered for everyone to stay still. But Arun's breath came too fast, too loud. Something brushed past him. A whisper of air and heat. He gasped, and the sound triggered chaos. Flashlights flared on, revealing only trees. But the shadows between them were wrong. One shape moved when the others didn't. It crouched low, its body merging with bark and moss, eyes reflecting light like twin mirrors. Then it stood, towering over them, bones woven into its flesh. The creature didn't lunge, it watched, breathing in rhythm with the rain as though the storm itself were alive. Then, in a blink, it vanished, melting back into the trees. The silence afterward was worse than its presence. The group broke into a run again, stumbling over roots and mud, flashlights bouncing off trunks like frantic signals. Somewhere behind them, something kept pace, never too close, never too far. A rustle, a whisper, a crack of wood under something heavy. Panic took over reason. They followed the river downstream, hoping it would lead to open ground. But when the trees thinned, what they found wasn't safety. It was a camp, torn apart. The camp smelled of rot and iron. Broken lanterns lay scattered beside blackened ashes. It hadn't been abandoned long. Coffee still warm in a half-collapsed cup. Miguel found claw marks on a tree trunk, deep and curved inward, like something had climbed down. Arun retrieved a journal, half buried in mud. The last entry read, "It waits until they sleep." They froze, no one spoke, but they all felt it. The eyes from the forest, watching, counting their heartbeats. Then, faintly, a splash from the river. Camila turned toward the sound. There was a reflection, 2 points of light drifting just above the waterline. Eyes. Suddenly, the eyes vanished beneath the surface. The water stilled. Seconds later, a violent splash erupted near the far bank. They aimed their lights, catching only waves and swirling foam. Arun muttered that they should move before it circles back, but his voice cracked midway. A branch snapped behind them. They spun. The creature was gone again, But Arun wasn't. His flashlight lay on the ground, beam flickering against a broken log. His footprints ended in a drag mark leading into the undergrowth. The jungle swallowed sound once more. Lena's pulse thundered in her ears. They called his name. No answer. They followed the drag marks, whispering Arun's name until their voices felt like ghosts. The tracks led to a clearing drenched in fog, moonlight breaking through in fragments. Then they saw him, or what was left. Arun's body hung several feet off the ground, tangled in vines like a ritual display. His eyes were open, mouth frozen mid-scream. Bones protruded through torn skin, rearranged unnaturally. The forest floor beneath him was disturbed, patterned in spirals, the same ones from the bone trail. Camila gasped and stumbled backward, but Miguel only whispered, "It's marking territory again." Lena dropped to her knees, unable to look away. The thing wasn't killing to feed, it was building something. Every death added to its monument of bone and mud. Miguel whispered that they had to destroy the markings or it would keep hunting. Camila shook her head violently, insisting the symbols were warnings, not traps. But before they could argue further, a deep growl rolled through the fog. Low, guttural, almost human. From every direction, eyes glimmered between the trees. Not one pair, dozens. The forest itself seemed to move. The forest itself seemed to move. Then, the first scream cut through the night, echoing so far it didn't sound human anymore. They ran without direction, crashing through vines and waterlogged roots as the night thundered around them. Lightning tore open the sky, revealing flashes of movement all around. Shadows darting through the trees. Not one creature, but many. The air grew thick with a smell of iron and decay. Lena's flashlight flickered, sputtering out, leaving her in momentary darkness. When it came back on, Miguel and Camila were gone. Panic surged like fire. She called their names, but the forest swallowed her voice. The trees seemed closer now, bending toward her, their roots pulsing faintly as if breathing. The jungle wasn't just a setting anymore. It was waking up. A flash of movement to her left, then a voice. Miguel called out, faint but real. She followed the sound through the mist until she found him crouched behind a fallen trunk, clutching his side. Blood seeped between his fingers. He whispered that Camila had gone ahead, leading something away. Before Lena could answer, a shriek pierced the jungle. Not human, but not animal either. The trees shuddered, leaves raining down like ash. Miguel's eyes went wide. He grabbed her arm. "Don't look up," he said. But she did, and what she saw made her drop the light. A shape was moving above them, skin shifting like bark, bones flexing beneath. The creature descended in silence, its body twisting between branches like liquid shadow. Lena dragged Miguel into the hollow of a tree as it landed nearby. Its footsteps soft but heavy. She clamped a hand over his mouth as it passed. Through the gaps in the bark, she saw its body up close, bones stitched into its flesh, vertebrae layered like armor, and its face hidden beneath a mask of polished skulls. It paused, tilting its head, sniffing the air. Then it reached out, touching the trunk where they hid. The wood creaked beneath its fingers. For a heartbeat, she thought it could hear their hearts beating. Then, just as suddenly, it turned and vanished into the fog again. They waited until the forest went still again before crawling out. The rain had stopped, leaving only the echo of distant thunder. Miguel could barely walk, his wound deep, his breath ragged. They stumbled toward the sound of running water, hoping for a way out. But when they reached it, the river wasn't a river anymore. It was a gorge filled with bones, hundreds of them, stretching as far as they could see. A thick stench rose from it. Lena realized the trail they had followed had always led here. It wasn't random, it was a path home. For the creature, they followed the ridge along the bone gorge, searching for a crossing, when a faint cry echoed through the mist. Camila's voice, weak but alive. Lena sprinted toward it despite Miguel's warning. She found Camila kneeling at the edge of the gorge, her face streaked with tears and ash. She whispered that the forest wasn't haunted. It was protecting something buried beneath. Before Lena could ask what, Camila pointed to the ground. A giant carving spread beneath their feet, half exposed by erosion. The same spiral symbol, carved deep into stone. It wasn't a warning. It was a seal. The creature wasn't the forest's curse. It was its guardian. The rain began again. Slow, heavy drops that seemed to echo against stone. The carved spiral at their feet pulsed faintly under the water's touch, like something beneath it was breathing. Camila traced the lines with shaking fingers, whispering that this was not a warning at all. It was a lock. She said the tribes once spoke of a guardian that devoured trespassers to keep the dead contained. Lena felt her heart pounding. The bones, the patterns, the killings, they were sacrifices, replacements to keep the seal fed. Lightning cracked above, and from deep within the gorge, a low rumble answered. Something massive was waking below. He wore. An massive was waking below. The ground shook violently, cracks spider webbing across the stone. From beneath, steam erupted, carrying with it the stench of decay. Miguel yelled for them to run, but Lena couldn't move. Her eyes fixed on a skeletal hand pushing through the spiral's center. The creature emerged slowly, not crawling out but unfolding, its limbs rearranging, ribs expanding outward like wings. It wasn't the same guardian I'd seen. It was older, larger, and made of the bones that once filled the gorge. The forest seemed to bow to it, leaves trembling as if in prayer, and then it turned its hollow gaze toward them. The creature roared, a deep, hollow sound that felt less like noise and more like pressure inside their skulls. Camila shouted that the only way to stop it was to restore the seal. To give it what it was missing. Lena realized what that meant. The sacrifices, the offerings, the bones. Miguel shook his head, refusing to let anyone stay behind. But when the creature began to move toward them, crushing bones underfoot like sand, Camila made her choice. She ran toward it, arms raised, shouting words in a language the forest seemed to remember. The creature slowed, towering above her. For a moment, everything went silent. The guardian reached down, its bony hand engulfing Camila. For an instant, her eyes met Lena's, calm, accepting. Then the creature crushed her, and the spiral flared with blinding light. The ground beneath them shuddered violently. Miguel dragged Lena backward as bones from the gorge began to move, sliding and twisting back into the seal. The creature's form fractured, collapsing inward as though being swallowed by the earth itself. When the light faded, all that remained was silence. The kind that presses against the heart. The spiral had gone dark again. The guardian had returned to sleep. Dawn broke over the rainforest, painting the mist in gold. The gorge was silent now. No bones, no markings. Just the hum of insects and the steady rhythm of the rain. Lena sat beside the still body of Miguel, his breathing faint but alive. They had survived, but the cost was heavy. She looked down at the sealed stone one last time. The spiral faintly etched beneath layers of mud. The forest no longer felt hostile, only ancient and patient. As the drone of cicadas rose, Lena whispered a promise to the jungle. No one would ever return here again. But deep below, beneath roots and stone, something still pulsed. Waiting, the sun rose higher, but the light barely pierced the canopy. Every shadow looked alive. Every leaf whispered like it remembered their trespass. Lena helped Miguel walk, following the river downstream, where fog drifted low and silver. The jungle seemed calmer now, almost forgiving, but she felt it watching still, quiet, curious, patient. Birds had returned, their calls sharp and echoing, but beneath their song came something else. A faint clicking sound, steady and rhythmic, moving with the breeze. Lena stopped, glancing back at the spiral hidden by distance. For a moment she thought she saw the trees shift, bending as if to mark their path. They walked for hours without speaking. The map was gone. The compass spun uselessly. Every path looked the same, yet Lena felt a strange familiarity, as if the forest itself guided her. Miguel limped beside her, whispering that maybe the jungle didn't want them dead. Maybe it wanted them to remember. She didn't answer. The trail curved around a fallen tree, and there, caught in the roots, was something glinting in the light. A necklace, Camilla's, mud-caked but intact. Lena knelt, trembling hands brushing away the dirt. It wasn't where Camilla had fallen. Something, or someone, had moved it here. The forest began to change. The air cooled, the ground firmed, and birdsong faded to silence again. They found themselves back at the clearing where the expedition had first begun, the place where they'd followed the bone trail. Everything was different now. The bones were gone, the mud was undisturbed, even the prints had vanished. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered, as if the jungle had burned and healed overnight. Miguel fell to his knees, exhausted. Lena looked around, realization sinking in. They hadn't escaped. They had been brought back. They decided to rest, though sleep never came. Lena sat against a tree, tracing the pendant's pattern with her thumb, its spiral matching the one carved into the stone. Miguel murmured, half awake, that maybe the seal didn't trap something evil. It just balanced the living and the dead. As his voice faded, Lena noticed something strange in the dirt beside her. Fresh footprints, barefoot, leading toward the trees. She called his name softly, but he didn't stir. The prints were small, Camilla's size. Her pulse quickened. She followed them, one slow step at a time, until they disappeared into the undergrowth. The air grew colder. The footprints stopped near a large fig tree, whose roots split the earth like veins. Hanging from one root was a single vine, twisting, shifting slightly, as though breathing. When Lena stepped closer, she saw it wasn't a vine at all. It was braided human hair. She froze, every instinct screaming to turn back, but the pendant in her hand pulsed faintly, warm against her skin. She looked up, and for an instant, through the mist, she saw Camilla, alive, untouched, standing between the trees, smiling softly. Then the forest swallowed her whole, leaving only the clicking sound again, slow and deliberate, echoing through the roots. The forest no longer felt like a place. It felt like a heartbeat. Every sound had rhythm. Every gust of wind pulsed through the trees like veins. Lena wandered deeper, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The pendant glowed brighter the farther she went, casting soft ripples of light on the damp leaves. The deeper she ventured, the quieter it became. Even the insects stopped singing. Then she reached it, a massive hollow beneath the roots of the ancient fig tree. Inside, she saw carvings covering the walls, humans kneeling, offering bones to the earth, generations repeating the same act. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a curse. It was a covenant. A faint rustle behind her, Miguel. He had followed, pale and weak, but alive. He saw the carvings and whispered that this was what the forest had wanted them to see. Lena touched one of the figures etched into the wall, feeling warmth radiating from the stone. The glow spread across the carvings, awakening them, the figures shifting subtly, the bones moving like living things. Miguel grabbed her hand, pulling her back, but the light followed, crawling up her arm like veins of fire. The forest responded with a low groan, roots tightening above them. The jungle was feeding again, through her. Lena tore her hand away, panting, the light still pulsing beneath her skin. Miguel tried to drag her out, but the entrance had already begun to close, roots intertwining like serpents. The air grew thick and heavy. She realized what the forest wanted. Someone to replace the guardian, someone to maintain the balance. It wasn't about escape anymore. It was about continuation. Miguel shouted her name as the ground trembled violently. She turned to him, tears cutting through mud on her cheeks. "It has to be one of us," she whispered. Then, before he could stop her, she stepped back toward the glowing wall. The wall accepted her touch, and the light surged outward, flooding the cavern with blinding brilliance. Roots twisted upward, wrapping around her body, but not crushing. Holding her gently, reverently, Miguel screamed her name, but the sound was lost beneath the roar of the earth. Her eyes glowed the same color as the pendant. The carvings changed again. New figures appeared among the old ones. The last image burned into Miguel's mind before darkness consumed everything was Lena's face turning peaceful, her form merging into the roots, the light sinking slowly back into the soil. When the light faded, Miguel woke outside the hollow. The rain gone, the jungle silent again. The trees stood motionless, ancient and still. The pendant lay beside him, cold and dark. He rose slowly, calling Lena's name. But only the whisper of leaves answered. In the distance, the bone gorge had sealed entirely. No trace of death, only new growth, sprouting where the spiral once led. As he limped toward the river, a familiar sound followed him. The faint clicking, rhythmic and slow. He turned once more toward the jungle and froze. Between the trees, just visible through mist, stood a figure. Tall, slender, motionless, watching.